I walked into the party with my head held high, my boyfriend, Jake, by my side. It was our annual summer bash, a tradition that brought all our friends together. The night was young, the air filled with laughter and music, and I felt a deep sense of contentment. Jake was the life of the party, as always, charming everyone with his wit and charisma. He was good at it too, almost too good, but tonight I didn't mind. Tonight was about fun, friends, and forgetting the monotony of daily life. But as the evening progressed, I noticed a subtle shift in Jake's demeanor. He seemed more interested in chatting up our new neighbor, Lily, than in spending time with me. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself that he was just being friendly. After all, who wouldn't want to welcome the new neighbor? But the way he looked at her, with an intensity I hadn't seen in a long time, planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Was I being paranoid? Was the wine making me see things that weren't there? Feeling a pang of jealousy, I decided to mingle with other guests. If Jake could play the social butterfly, then so could I. That's when I met Mark, a colleague of Jake's who had recently moved to town. He was charming, attentive, and, most importantly, he made me feel seen. Not in that fleeting, "Oh, you look nice," way, but in a deep, meaningful, "I actually care what you have to say," way. We spent a good portion of the night talking and laughing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something that I hadn't felt in a while. Interest, attraction, anything but ignored. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice Jake and Lily disappearing together for longer periods. My heart sank, and anger bubbled beneath the surface. Every time I saw them, my stomach twisted into tighter knots. Finally, I decided to confront Jake, but he brushed me off, saying I was overreacting. Overreacting? Me? Because noticing your boyfriend getting cozy with another woman is such an overreaction. His dismissive attitude only fueled my frustration. What was I supposed to do? Just stand there and watch? Seeking solace, I found myself gravitating towards Mark again. He seemed to understand my turmoil without me having to say a word. We ended up on the balcony, the cool night air doing little to calm my raging emotions. Mark's presence, however, was a balm to my wounded pride. He didn't need to say much, just being there, listening, was enough. He had this way of making me feel like I mattered, like my feelings were valid. It was a welcome change from the emotional roller coaster inside. Back inside, I saw Jake whisper something in Lily's ear, making her giggle. That was the last straw. My anger reached a boiling point, and without thinking, I grabbed Mark and kissed him passionately. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to us. For a moment, time stood still. There was no music, no chatter, just the thunderous pounding of my heart and the weight of every gaze in the room. Jake's face twisted in shock and anger. He stormed over, but before he could say anything, I turned to him and said, "If you can flirt with another woman at our party, then I can kiss another man." The tension was palpable, and the night that had started so perfectly had taken a dramatic turn. The look in his eyes was a mix of betrayal and fury, and for a split second, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered the way he had looked at Lily, and any remorse evaporated. This was my retaliation, my stand, and if it meant turning our perfect night into a battlefield, so be it. The aftermath of the kiss was immediate and explosive. Jake pulled me aside, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell were you thinking?" He spat, his voice rising above the music. The festive atmosphere evaporated like a pop bubble, and suddenly, our perfect night had turned into a public spectacle. I could feel the eyes of our friends on us, their shock palpable. What was I thinking? I shot back, sarcasm dripping from my words. Maybe I was thinking about how you spent the entire night flirting with Lily. Jake's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "You made a scene," he growled. "In front of everyone." "Yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't have given me a reason to," I retorted, my anger boiling over. Our voices echoed through the room, drowning out the once lively music. Lily, sensing the tension, quietly slipped out of the party. Smart move, I thought bitterly. Mark, however, stayed by my side, a silent pillar of support. Jake's accusations grew more heated, and I found myself defending not just my actions, but our entire relationship. The cracks that had been forming for months were now glaringly obvious, and everyone could see them. The party eventually fizzled out, guests leaving in awkward silence. Jake and I were left in the aftermath of our public fight, the air between us thick with unresolved tension. We retreated to different corners of the house, the silence between us heavy and oppressive. I couldn't help but replay the night's events, wondering where things had gone so wrong. The next morning, the tension was still thick. We barely spoke, each of us nursing our wounds. I tried to go about my day as normally as possible, but the weight of our argument hung over me like a dark cloud. At work, I found it hard to concentrate, my mind constantly drifting back to Jake and the mess we were in. Every email, every task felt trivial compared to the emotional hurricane I was dealing with. That evening, Jake and I sat down for a serious conversation. The words hung heavy between us as we both apologized, but the hurt was still fresh. He admitted to being attracted to Lily but insisted nothing had happened. "I swear, it was just a stupid crush," he said, his eyes pleading for understanding. I wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing. We agreed to try and move past it, but the damage was done. The invisible wall between us had grown taller, thicker. Despite our best efforts, the tension lingered. I found myself thinking more and more about Mark. He had given me his number before leaving the party, and I toyed with the idea of reaching out. Part of me felt guilty, but another part longed for the connection I had felt with him. It was like a drug I couldn't shake off, a tantalizing escape from the mess my life had become. One afternoon, unable to resist any longer, I texted Mark. We exchanged a few messages, and I felt a thrill that I hadn't felt in a long time. His words were a balm to my bruised ego, and soon enough, we agreed to meet for coffee. I felt a mix of excitement and guilt, knowing I was playing with fire but unable to help myself. The prospect of seeing him again was too tempting, a brief respite from the turmoil that had become my everyday life. Meeting Mark for coffee felt exhilarating. Like butterflies in my stomach, heart-racing kind of exhilarating. We met at this quaint little cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of freshly ground coffee beans hanging in the air. From the moment I saw him, I knew it was going to be a dangerous day. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughing like old friends. The connection between us was undeniable, and I felt a spark that had been missing from my relationship with Jake for a long time. As we parted ways, he kissed my cheek, leaving me wanting more. Damn, that cheek kiss felt more intimate than anything Jake and I had shared in months. Back at home, I struggled with my feelings. I loved Jake, or at least, I thought I did. But our relationship was strained, like a rubber band pulled too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Mark was a new and exciting prospect, but I knew it was wrong to pursue anything further. Wasn't it? I decided to focus on my relationship with Jake, hoping we could rebuild what we had lost. Maybe a little distance from Mark would help. Easier said than done. Jake and I started attending couples therapy, hoping to mend the rift between us. The sessions were tough, forcing us to confront our issues head-on. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was a painful process, like ripping off a band-aid that had been on too long, but I was determined to make it work. For better or worse, right? Despite our efforts, the temptation of Mark lingered. He was always there, in the back of my mind, like an itch I couldn't scratch. We continued to text, and I found myself looking forward to his messages more than I should. He was a breath of fresh air, a reminder of what it felt like to be truly seen and appreciated. I knew I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't stop myself. Every text, every flirty message was a step closer to the edge. One evening, Jake went out with friends, and I found myself alone at home. The silence was deafening. Mark texted, asking if I wanted to meet up. I hesitated, knowing it was a bad idea, but the loneliness and desire were too strong. I agreed, and we met at a quiet bar downtown. The kind of place where no one knew your name, and no one cared about your problems. The chemistry between us was electric. We talked, we laughed, and before long, we were kissing passionately. It felt so right, yet so wrong. My brain was screaming at me to stop, but my heart? My heart was singing a different tune. I knew I was betraying Jake, but in that moment, I didn't care. I needed to feel alive, and Mark gave me that. He was like a drug, and I was hooked. As the night ended, guilt washed over me like a cold shower. I drove home, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. I loved Jake, but my feelings for Mark were undeniable. What kind of person was I becoming? I knew I had to make a choice, but I wasn't ready. I felt trapped between two worlds, each pulling me in a different direction. The safe, familiar world of Jake and the thrilling, unpredictable world of Mark. How could I choose when both felt so right and so wrong? Balancing my relationship with Jake and my affair with Mark became increasingly difficult. Each day felt like a performance, and I was the lead actress in a very twisted play. I found myself making excuses to see Mark, lying to Jake about where I was and who I was with. The guilt was overwhelming, but the thrill of being with Mark was too intoxicating to give up. It was like living in a perpetual state of adrenaline, and I was addicted to the rush. At work, I became more distracted, my mind constantly drifting to Mark. How could I concentrate on spreadsheets and meetings when all I wanted was to feel his touch? My colleagues noticed the change in me, commenting on how happy I seemed. Happy, huh? If they only knew. I smiled and nodded, knowing they had no idea about the turmoil I was experiencing. My secret life was exhilarating but exhausting. The energy it took to keep my lies straight could have powered a small city. Jake, oblivious to my affair, continued to try and fix our relationship. Bless his clueless heart. We went on dates, attended therapy, and spent more time together. I felt torn between my loyalty to him and my desire for Mark. Each day was a struggle to keep my two worlds from colliding. It was like juggling fire while walking a tightrope over a pit of alligators. Fun times. One weekend, Jake suggested a getaway to rekindle our romance. I reluctantly agreed, knowing it meant time away from Mark. We went to a cozy cabin in the mountains, hoping to reconnect. The trip was nice, picturesque even. We hiked, we talked, we laughed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Or rather, someone. My heart was like a seesaw, constantly tipping back and forth, unable to find balance. Despite my efforts to focus on Jake, I found myself texting Mark whenever I could. The secrecy added an extra layer of excitement, but also a heavy burden of guilt. It was like eating a delicious cake laced with poison. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Every message, every secret rendezvous was a risk, and yet I craved it. Back from our trip, the routine of daily life resumed. Jake seemed more optimistic about our future, while I felt increasingly conflicted. My feelings for Mark were growing stronger, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. The tension between my two lives was becoming unbearable. It was like living in a pressure cooker, and I could feel myself nearing the breaking point. One evening, while Jake was out, I invited Mark over. We spent the night together, and for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. Being with him felt right, and I started to question my relationship with Jake. Could I continue living this double life, or was it time to make a decision? The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and I found myself standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. The stakes were high, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. The cracks in my double life started to show. It was bound to happen, I suppose. You can only juggle so many lies before one drops and smashes into a million pieces. Jake began to notice my distant behavior and frequent absences. He grew suspicious, questioning me more often about where I was and who I was with. His eyes would narrow, his voice just a bit sharper than usual. The guilt and fear of being caught weighed heavily on me. Each question felt like a knife, and my heart would race as I scrambled for believable answers. One afternoon, while I was at work, Jake found a message from Mark on my phone. It was a simple text, nothing incriminating, just a "thinking of you," with a smiley face. But it was enough to arouse his suspicion. When I walked through the door that evening, I knew something was wrong. Jake stood in the living room, my phone in his hand, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. "Who's Mark?" he demanded. My stomach dropped. I was caught off guard, struggling to come up with a plausible explanation, but my mouth went dry, and the words just wouldn't come. Jake's trust in me was shattered. He became more controlling, checking my phone and questioning my every move. Our relationship, already strained, was now hanging by a thread. I felt suffocated by his constant scrutiny, but I knew I had brought it upon myself. Every time he glanced at me with those accusing eyes, I felt a pang of guilt. I'd made this bed, and now I had to lie in it. Despite the growing tension at home, I continued to see Mark. He became my escape, a sanctuary from the chaos of my relationship with Jake. But the more time I spent with Mark, the more I realized I couldn't keep living this way. Something had to give. I couldn't juggle my heart between two people without breaking it completely. One evening, Jake followed me to a cafe where I was meeting Mark. I saw Jake's car parked a few spaces down, but I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. Paranoia, right? We talked and laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few tables away. When I returned home, Jake was waiting for me, his face a mask of hurt and anger. My stomach churned as I braced myself for the inevitable explosion. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Jake accused me of betrayal, of destroying the trust and love we had built over the years. I tried to explain my feelings, my loneliness, but he couldn't hear me over his own pain. His words cut deep, each one a reminder of my own failings. The argument ended with Jake storming out, leaving me alone with my guilt. The sound of the door slamming echoed in my mind long after he was gone. In the days that followed, Jake and I barely spoke. He moved into the guest room, and the silence between us was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every muffled sound from his new room felt like a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I continued to see Mark, but the joy I once felt was now tainted by the knowledge of the hurt I had caused. The once exhilarating thrill of our affair had turned into a constant reminder of my betrayal. I was lost, unsure of how to move forward. Jake eventually told me he needed space to think. He went to stay with a friend, leaving me alone in our home. The emptiness of the house was suffocating. I spent the nights reflecting on my choices, the path that had led me here. Each memory, each decision played back in my mind like a cruel rerun of a show I couldn't turn off. I realized I had to make a decision, not just for myself, but for both Jake and Mark. The weight of it all was crushing, but I knew that continuing this way was no longer an option. With Jake gone, I had time to reflect on my actions and the consequences. The house felt empty without him, a hollow shell that echoed my regrets. I missed the familiarity of our life together, the comfort of routine, the little habits we had formed over the years. But I also couldn't deny the feelings I had for Mark. Each day was a reminder of the crossroads I was standing at, and I knew I needed to make a choice. I decided to meet with Mark to discuss our future. We met at a quiet park, the kind with winding paths and benches hidden under ancient oak trees. It was ironic, really, meeting in such a serene place to discuss something so turbulent. I poured my heart out to him, telling him about the pain I had caused Jake and the confusion I felt about my feelings for both of them. Mark listened patiently, understanding the weight of my dilemma. He didn't judge, didn't push, just listened. Mark admitted that he had developed strong feelings for me but understood the complexity of the situation. "I don't want to be the cause of your pain or the reason for your broken relationship with Jake," he said, his voice soft but steady. We both knew that continuing our affair would only lead to more heartache. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was the truth. After much soul-searching, I decided to end things with Mark. It was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, but I knew it was the right thing to do. We shared a tearful goodbye, acknowledging the impact we had on each other's lives and the lessons we had learned. Walking away from him felt like ripping out a piece of my heart, but sometimes, doing the right thing means enduring the most pain. With Mark out of the picture, I focused on repairing my relationship with Jake. I reached out to him, asking if we could talk. He agreed, and we met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe where we could speak without the weight of our shared home pressing down on us. I apologized sincerely for my actions, expressing my regret and my desire to make things right. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I know I hurt you, and I wish I could take it all back." Jake listened, but the hurt in his eyes was evident. He told me he needed time to heal and figure out if he could trust me again. I understood his need for space and promised to give him the time he needed. We agreed to continue therapy separately, hoping it would help us find clarity. It was a start, a tentative step towards mending what was broken. The days turned into weeks, and Jake and I slowly started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I doubted if we could ever fully recover. But we both made an effort, attending therapy, communicating openly, and trying to rediscover the love we once shared. Each session was a small victory, each honest conversation a step closer to healing. As the months passed, Jake and I found a new rhythm. Our relationship was different, marked by the scars of our past, but we were stronger for it. The experience had taught us both valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the importance of being present for each other. We learned to cherish the small moments, to appreciate the simple joys of being together without the shadow of betrayal hanging over us. Life was far from perfect, but we were making progress. And in that progress, I found hope. Hope that we could build something new from the ruins of what we had once had. Hope that we could move forward, stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever came next. Jake and I decided to take a trip together to celebrate our progress. It felt like the right move, like we were finally ready to breathe in some fresh air and leave behind the suffocating fog of our past. We chose a secluded beach destination, hoping to reconnect and create new memories. The thought of warm sand between my toes and the rhythmic crashing of waves was enough to pull me out of bed each morning with a glimmer of anticipation. The time away from our daily routines allowed us to focus on each other and rebuild the intimacy we had lost. We left our phones off, ignored emails, and simply existed in the moment. It was refreshing, like hitting a reset button on our lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, we sat on the beach, talking about our future and the lessons we had learned from our ordeal. "We've made some pretty big mistakes," Jake said, his voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of the waves. "Yeah," I agreed, tracing patterns in the sand with my fingers. "But we've also learned a lot. And I think that's what matters." We acknowledged the mistakes we had made and vowed to be more honest and supportive of each other moving forward. It was a turning point, and we both felt a renewed sense of hope. The past was still there, lingering like a ghost, but it no longer held the power to control us. Back home, we continued to work on our relationship. We attended couples therapy regularly, and I made a conscious effort to be more present and attentive. Jake, too, became more open and communicative, and we found ourselves growing closer with each passing day. The sessions were a mix of hard truths and small victories, but each one brought us a little closer to the couple we wanted to be. One evening, Jake surprised me with a heartfelt gesture. He had planned a romantic dinner at home, complete with my favorite meal and a playlist of songs that held special meaning for us. As we danced in the living room, swaying to the music, I realized how far we had come and how much stronger our bond had become. It was a simple moment, but it spoke volumes about our commitment to each other. We also made an effort to rebuild our social life together. We hosted small gatherings with friends, went on double dates, and participated in community events. These activities helped us to reconnect with our friends and create a support system that strengthened our relationship. It felt good to be part of a larger community again, to laugh and share experiences with people who cared about us. Despite our progress, the memories of the past still lingered. There were moments of doubt and insecurity, but we faced them together. We learned to communicate openly about our feelings, addressing any issues before they could fester and cause harm. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. And each time we navigated a difficult conversation, we emerged a little stronger. As time passed, I realized how much I had grown from the experience. I became more self-aware, understanding the impact of my actions on those around me. I also learned the importance of honesty and the value of true commitment. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I was not the same person I had been, and neither was Jake. And that was okay. Jake and I eventually reached a place of stability and happiness. Our relationship was not perfect, but it was real and grounded in mutual respect and love. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. And as we stood hand in hand, looking out at the world before us, I knew we were prepared to tackle it together. Just as I thought life was settling into a peaceful rhythm, an unexpected twist arrived. It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon when I received a message from Lily, the woman who had inadvertently set this entire chain of events in motion. Her name flashing on my screen felt like a ghost tapping on my shoulder. She apologized for her part in the drama and asked if we could meet to clear the air. Oh, this was going to be good. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet with Lily. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind with overpriced lattes and too many ferns. Lily looked nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. She expressed her regret for her actions, explaining that she had been going through a difficult time and hadn't intended to come between Jake and me. Her sincerity took me by surprise. Who knew the homewrecker had feelings? As we talked, I found myself empathizing with Lily. She was genuinely remorseful, and our conversation helped me to let go of any lingering resentment. She wasn't some evil temptress after all, just a woman who made some poor choices. We ended on a positive note, with a newfound understanding and a promise to move forward without any hard feelings. It felt oddly cathartic, like airing out a musty room. Meeting Lily had an unexpected effect on me. It prompted me to reflect on forgiveness and the importance of letting go of the past. I shared the encounter with Jake that evening over dinner. To my surprise, it sparked a deep conversation about our own journey and the people who had played roles in it. It was like pulling at a thread and unraveling a whole new layer of understanding. Inspired by our conversation, Jake and I decided to reach out to Mark. We felt it was important to close that chapter of our lives properly. We met with him in a neutral setting, a park, because why not make it as cliché as possible? While it was initially awkward, it allowed us to express our gratitude and bid farewell with a sense of closure. It was like tying up loose ends in the messiest chapter of a novel. With the past firmly behind us, Jake and I focused on building a brighter future. We discussed our long-term goals, both individually and as a couple. These conversations brought us closer, helping us to align our dreams and aspirations. It was like mapping out an adventure we were both excited to embark on together. One of our shared dreams was to travel more and experience new cultures together. We started planning trips to places we had always wanted to visit. Our first destination was Italy, a place filled with romance and history. The excitement of planning the trip brought a new level of joy to our relationship. Who knew planning could be such a turn-on? As we prepared for our travels, we also made changes to our home life. We redecorated our house, creating a space that reflected our new beginning. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to leave behind the old and embrace the new. Our home became a sanctuary, filled with love and warmth. Every stroke of paint, every new piece of furniture was like a step forward, a declaration that we were ready for the next chapter. And this time, it was going to be a damn good one. Our trip to Italy was everything we had hoped for and more. It was like stepping into a postcard, each scene more breathtaking than the last. We explored the picturesque countryside, indulged in delicious cuisine, and immersed ourselves in the rich culture. It was a sensory overload in the best possible way. From the rolling vineyards of Tuscany to the ancient ruins of Rome, every moment was a new adventure. The experience brought us even closer, reminding us of the reasons we fell in love in the first place. It was like rediscovering a favorite book and finding new meaning in the familiar pages. During a romantic evening in Venice, Jake surprised me with a heartfelt declaration of his love. We were sitting on a gondola, the water reflecting the twinkling lights of the city. Out of nowhere, he took my hand and looked into my eyes with a seriousness that made my heart skip a beat. "I appreciate the journey we've taken together more than you'll ever know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't imagine my life without you." His words brought tears to my eyes, reaffirming our commitment to each other. It was one of those rare, perfect moments that you want to bottle up and keep forever. Back home, we continued to nurture our relationship. We made it a point to spend quality time together, whether it was cooking dinner, going for walks, or simply enjoying each other's company. These small moments of connection became the foundation of our renewed love. The simple act of sharing a meal or watching a movie together felt profoundly intimate, like we were rebuilding the trust that had once been shattered. We also made an effort to give back to our community. We volunteered at local charities and participated in neighborhood events. These activities not only brought us joy but also strengthened our bond as we worked together to make a positive impact on the world around us. It was heartwarming to see Jake interact with our neighbors, to watch him laugh and share stories with people who had become like family to us. As our relationship flourished, we decided to take another big step, starting a family. The prospect of having children was both exciting and daunting, but we felt ready for the challenge. We began making plans, preparing our home and our hearts for this new chapter in our lives. We turned one of the spare rooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft, calming blue. Every tiny onesie we bought, every piece of furniture we assembled brought us one step closer to our dream. The journey to parenthood brought its own set of challenges, but it also deepened our connection. We supported each other through the ups and downs, learning to navigate the uncertainties together. The anticipation of welcoming a new life into our family filled us with hope and joy. We attended parenting classes, read countless books, and spent hours discussing our hopes and fears. Each shared experience was a building block, adding strength to the foundation of our relationship. In the midst of all these changes, we never lost sight of the importance of communication. We continued to attend therapy, both individually and as a couple, ensuring that we remained on the same page. These sessions provided us with valuable tools to maintain a healthy and loving relationship. It was like having a map in uncharted territory, guiding us through the rough patches and helping us find our way back to each other. As the years went by, Jake and I grew stronger and more resilient. Our journey had been filled with twists and turns, but it had also brought us closer than ever. We faced each challenge with determination and love, knowing that we were capable of overcoming anything together. Our love story was not a fairy tale, but it was real and it was ours. We had built something beautiful from the ashes of our mistakes, and I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it hand in hand. Looking back on our journey, I realized how far we had come. It was one of those rare quiet mornings where everything felt just right. The sun was shining through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over our home. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and for a moment, I allowed myself to savor the peacefulness. The affair that had once threatened to tear us apart had ultimately strengthened our bond. How ironic, right? The thing that nearly destroyed us ended up being the catalyst for our strongest connection yet. We had learned to trust, forgive, and love each other in ways we never thought possible. Our relationship was a testament to the power of resilience and commitment. I mean, if we could survive that nightmare and come out the other side stronger, we could handle anything. The scars were still there, but they had faded over time, becoming part of our story rather than defining it. As I stood there, lost in thought, Jake walked into the kitchen and wrapped his arms around me from behind. His touch was warm and familiar, and I leaned into him, feeling a sense of contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Morning," he murmured, kissing the top of my head. "Morning," I replied, smiling, thinking about how far we've come. He turned me around to face him, his eyes soft and filled with love. "Yeah, it's been a journey, hasn't it?" I nodded, looking into his eyes. The lessons we had learned and the growth we had experienced had shaped us into the couple we were today. We were no longer the same people who had taken each other for granted, who had let misunderstandings and hurt feelings fester until they nearly destroyed us. We were stronger, more resilient, and more in love than ever. We faced the future with confidence and hope, ready for whatever life had in store for us. The trials we had endured had forged an unbreakable bond between us, one that was built on a foundation of trust, communication, and unwavering commitment. We had proven to ourselves and to each other that we could weather any storm and come out the other side even stronger. As we stood there, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that I had never known before. Our love had been tested and had emerged stronger than ever. We had been through hell and back, but we had come out of it with a deeper appreciation for each other and for the life we had built together. And as we looked toward the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, side by side, with love and determination.